Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So we're going ahead and get started. So I'm Dr. Dimitra Michalaka, Associate Professor at the Civil and Environmental Engineering at the Citadel. And with us, we also have Dr. Mike Hunter, Professor at the Civil and Environmental Engineering at Georgia Tech. And together we will talk to you about strategies for mitigating congestion in small urban and rural areas. So this project is funded by STRIDE. STRIDE is the Southern Transportation Research, Innovation and Development and Education Center. It was funded in 2016 under the USDOT Transportation Research Center initiative. And the lead includes 10 universities in the Southeast, and the lead institution is University of Florida. Our goal is coming up with innovative strategies for mitigating congestion. So this project was part of it. So we worked on this project along with other team members here, Dr. Aragwal from University of Florida, Dr. Siva Srinivasan from University of Florida, and Dr. Brown from the Citadel. This presentation will include an introduction to our project, a short literature review, a survey that we conducted and what we found out from that survey, interviews that we conducted after we finished the survey, and we aggregated all the results so we get more insight, then resources that we prepared, and closing. So to begin with, when we hear congestion, many times we think of these big urban areas with a lot of traffic, but many times we have, so I see, one moment. Okay, I cannot see the chat. So I saw that a message arrived, but I cannot see it. So Dean, can you see the chat? So everybody will be muted. Maybe I should say that. So if you have questions, please type them in the chat. Okay, so when we hear congestion, we usually think of the big urban areas, but unfortunately, congestion is also an issue in the small urban and rural areas. And we classified those areas as areas having population of 50,000 people or less. Now, those areas usually don't have access to all the resources and trainings that big areas will have. So we wanted to focus and see what are their needs and what is going on in these areas. So we focus to see what are the key characteristics of the small urban and rural area congestion, what are some resource constraints that are affecting them, and then what resources can we develop in order to help them mitigate congestion and solve some of their problems. So looking at the literature before we reached out to them, we saw that we have 7 sources of congestion. So those are split in 3 different categories. In the first category, we have the traffic influencing events like traffic incidents, work zones, and environmental conditions such as weather. So all those will affect and create congestion. Then in category 2, we have the traffic demand. So fluctuation in normal traffic. So if you have traffic in different times of the day, influence your traffic, then they cannot be predicted ahead of time, or special events that you have a lot of traffic created just because something is going on. And in category 3, we have the physical highway features that are traffic control devices. So if there are poorly timed traffic signals or signs that are not maybe supposed to be there, and then physical bottlenecks, so that there are constraints in the physical network that could create congestion. Let's say going from 3 lanes down to 2 lanes. Then all those will have, like if we have traffic, will have consequences. So consequences of the tracking impacts. So you may have delays in the deliveries. So maybe companies will add more trucks to compensate for those, feeding more into the problem. Then on safety, so you have more traffic, then you may have more crashes. Actually, it's interesting that in the rural areas, we have about 2.5 more fatalities than in the other network. So it's something that is important to look into. Then we have impacts on businesses. You may not get people on time. And then, of course, everything comes with impacts in the household and in the region in terms of economy. So delaying getting somewhere, or maybe deciding not to go somewhere just because there is congestion, or you may have increased maintenance cost of the vehicles. So of course, we have all these consequences. So we wanted to focus and see what are the causes of congestion and what are the impacts in the small areas, as we said before. So we developed a survey, and the survey was sent out to the Southeast region. So the 9 states you see on the map plus Kentucky. So we look to see what agencies, like what areas there are there under 50,000 population, and then what agencies they have. And then we try to find information about those, like what contacts we can reach out to get this information we were looking for. And we wanted to focus on learning about what congestion challenges they have, what resources they use, and if they have specific needs. So the survey included 31 questions. The questions were split in different areas. So for example, what causes congestion in their area? Then if they are collaborating with different agencies. So if they're, the small agencies are collaborating with the state DOT, with local DOT, with the police department, with city county administration, with the public works department, with community improvement districts. So all those were part of the question that they could select to say, okay, yes, we're collaborating, or no, we're not. That was also an option in the question. Then how are they tracking congestion? So if, for example, they are counting how much, if they have an incident, how much that incident lasts, or if they're receiving phone calls from the citizens that they informing the agency, oh, there is congestion. If they're measuring queuing, if they're measuring delays, or if they're not tracking congestion at all. Then if they're using any congestion mitigation strategies, and those were specific to what causing congestion, and actually I'll go more into detail in few. And then if they have, if they're receiving any education or any training that could help them deal with these problems. In total, we sent out 445 survey requests. We didn't get as many answers, but at least we tried to reach anyone possible in the Southeast region. So more specifically, as I said, I will go in more detail. We asked them, like one of the first questions were to ask them in which degree those the following attributes that you see, and I'm going to zoom into them in few, contribute to their congestion. So if they selected that any of those influence the congestion in very high or high degree, then from the survey, they were directed to follow-up questions in each specific one. So we get more insight and more information of that. So for example, the first one that was day-to-day peak hour traffic, we said if that was an issue, and if it was an issue, has it deteriorated the last few years, so they could pick that. The next, about special events and tourism, we actually had several follow-up questions asking them, first, what contributes to congestion if we're talking about special events? For example, is it the location of the venue that is the problem, that doesn't have alternative routes, so people can use only one route getting there? Is it that there is limited parking? Is it that there aren't hotels and accommodations nearby the site, so people have to absolutely drive there? Is it because the road has limited capacity, so people getting there will create congestion? And then if they use any planning to mitigate a little bit that congestion from special events. For example, are they forecasting how many people are going to go there, if they're staggering the event times, if they're employing law enforcement to help out, and if they're using traffic applications to let people know about the traffic in the area. Then moving to work zones. So if they said that yes, work zones are an issue in congestion in our area, we focus to say, okay, so what are some things that you are employing to mitigate that? So are you using any applications? Are you using any variable message signs to let people know as they're approaching to be careful because there is a work zone there? If there are public airports, like communicating to the public, okay, there will be work zone this time of the day. Are they picking that time of the day? So let's say that we have road work only during night when there isn't too much traffic, so we don't have as much congestion during peak times. Now, sometimes I see there is work around here, like at 5 p.m., which is not supposed to do because there is so much traffic, so you don't want to have people stuck because there is work zone. Then for the next one, when there were traffic crashes, actually we combined those with the work zones because it's like, how do you let people know that there is an incident on the road and there will be congestion, so to avoid that. So maybe with the traffic app, you get a notification that says, oh, there is congestion, use alternative route, or if you have message signs letting you know about that. And then for parking, we ask them if they are providing additional parking, if there is parking control, if they're offering transit services to different locations, if they're using portable, changeable message signs. Actually, I live very close to Foley Beach in Charleston, South Carolina. And here, because of the coronavirus, they wanted to reduce the congestion and how many people are reaching Foley. So they limited the parking and they provided a lot of message signs. So as you were approaching the area, you could see where you could actually park and if you were willing to pay or not. So they were saying, okay, paid lots or different sides of the road. So to mitigate a little bit the congestion created from limiting the parking. So we asked them if they're using such kind of measures. Then we asked if weather was an issue in their area. So if there are high, like high rain, like heavy rain, if there are hurricanes, if there are winds, if there is sun glare, because there are some roads that in the afternoon you have the sun directly affecting the travelers. So we asked to find out if those were an issue. Then we moved to freight, asking them more information about freight, if they have long distance freight, local freight, if there are deliveries, if the delivery trucks are blocking the lane when they're trying to drop off material, different deliveries, and then if they're doing anything to mitigate that, staggering the hours, blocking certain roads, say, okay, trucks cannot access these roads certain times. And then, of course, we gave them the option to add any other issues that may be pertinent to their area that is not commonly seen. After we gave out the result, we collected a lot of information and we created the survey results. And now Mike Hunter is going to present to you the survey results. Mike.
Hey, thank you very much. Let's see, is my screen, wait a minute. All right, so hopefully we are seeing my screen at this point. All right.
I see it, so.
Okay. All right, so for the survey results, I'm just going to hit you with a bunch of data, kind of let you see what it is we found. The first thing, just sort of give you a sense of who we did talk to. So we identified the communities by using the 2017 American Community Survey 5-year estimates for populations. And we only surveyed communities under 50,000. And we did try to our best effort to get sort of a cross-section across the different states in the Southeast regions, and also a selection of across the different population sizes, which we've done 0 to 5,000, 5 to 10, 10 to 25, and 25 to 50. And all the ones we sent to were based on that. But one of the questions we obviously asked was for them to self-report their population. And you'll see actually 23% said their populations were higher than were in that report. And that's fine. You know, and it may be just sort of how they were defining the area that they were working on, or just older numbers. But so we received 66 responses from the 450, but 51 of those were for under 50,000. And so most of the results you're going to see from this point forward, unless I say otherwise, are for the 51 respondents that said they were 50,000 or less. The other thing to keep in mind when you're looking at the survey responses is the survey was conducted and completed 2019, right? I think it was in October, November 2019. So this was pre-COVID. So these results don't reflect anything they might be saying about congestion during the COVID time. Sort of a quick of the type of agencies we were surveying. Also, as you look, you'll notice the number of staff who manage traffic operations as a significant portion of their job. Didn't have to be only part of their job. You'll see the 0 to 5,000. The majority don't have anybody who really is focused on traffic as the primary part of their job. And then those that do have anybody will only have 1 or 2 people at most. And you see that increases as we go up, right? The 5 to 10,000. You still will have areas that don't have anyone, but then you start to see 1 or 2 or maybe more folks. And then the 10 to 25,000, now you're starting to be more likely to have at least 1 person assigned to the traffic management. And at 25, 50,000, they all at least had somebody assigned to it as a significant portion of their job. So that kind of gives you a sense of what it is you'll be looking at. The degree to which these folks said, you know, first of all, was congestion an issue, right? Did they even think, you know, then we get this question: is congestion an issue in a rural area? And in a way, you know, it's often thought, well, you know, what are you talking about? Well, I mean, there was agreement. You know, about half, right? A little over half either strongly agreed or somewhat agreed that congestion was an issue. So we know it's there and it's a high priority for a significant part, but there were those who weren't. And sort of interesting, I think, to break that up into our groups, our sizes of areas. And you'll notice, right, you know, the 25 to 50,000, the largest groups, they strongly agree, right? You saw a strong tendency towards saying, yes, congestion is a significant issue. And the 10 to 25 also, you know, had, you know, a subset who strongly agreed. It did get interesting as you got to the 5 to 10 and the 0 to 5, our 2 smaller regions. There was nobody who strongly agreed and said, yep, congestion management is really what we need to be thinking about. But there was agreement, right? So there was the somewhat agree by about half of the smaller agencies saying that there was an issue there, but the other half either, you know, didn't agree or disagree. They were sort of neutral or disagreed with it. So that kind of gives you a sense. There's definitely sort of dichotomy here between those in the 10 to 25, 25, 50, and then those under that amount. You know, the other thing that I found interesting when we were running through the survey and the survey results was you start to see, you know, very unique characteristics. Like there's a lot of variety among how each of these agencies are handling congestion. So this question was saying, you know, how much do you interact with other agencies? You'd be a state DOT, a local DOT, the police, the city, county, or maybe a CID. And it was fascinating to see that there really was a variety of interaction, right? Some worked a lot with the DOT, although, you know, a nearly equal amount, you know, would work a high degree with the DOT, but you have a, you know, group who didn't work with their DOT. And you have others, you know, when it came to the local DOT, yep, there were folks who worked with that. You know, there were folks who worked with their police departments. There were folks who worked with their city, county administration and public works. It really was, you know, sort of depending on the situation of that agency, who they're going to work with. So there wasn't sort of a one size solution fits all. except you did see there was an underrepresentation clearly of CIDs, right? So in these rural, small urban areas, community improvement districts were not a major player. Now, there were some that had a little bit in there, but they were certainly not a major part of it. The other thing that we were curious, I'm just curious how much people even were tracking. And our largest group said they didn't track it, right? Now, you could answer more than once. So this is 33%, and some answered that they tracked in several ways. So that's not 33% of the total. That's almost half of your total. This is saying no, that they don't even track congestion. The next largest portion is the way it's tracked is by phone calls, right? So there really isn't a formal way for tracking. And then after that, you can start looking at, they're paying attention to their incident duration. They're paying attention to, what sort of queuing they're seeing out in the field, what sort of delays. There was others, which include that maybe they're doing field studies. Some mentioned, hiring consultants to go out and do traffic studies. There was one who was, pretty well equipped. They had a lot of video detection and were doing real-time tracking back in their agency. So it was mixed, but over half clearly were dependent on either not tracking at all or using phone calls. So we can see sort of the information challenges that are also going to exist. Now, when we start looking at it, you can start saying, well, what are these different factors and, what type of congestion are they most worried about when you start looking at urban and rural? Our question, small urban and rural, and what we were wondering is, the problem's different than one would have to solve in a small urban rural than they would be, say, in a more urban area, such as Atlanta or something along those lines. And, so we looked at day-to-day peak hours, special event, work zones, traffic crashes, parking, weather, and freight. And, when we started looking at it, right, so the day-to-day, was that an issue? Well, interestingly, hey, 95% did say that day-to-day peak hour congestion has been increasing, right? So 95% of those small urban and rural did acknowledge that, yep, we are having a problem here. And it is increasing over time. Now, remember, this was pre-COVID. So, this wasn't something that somebody this summer said. So over the past 5 years, as of last year, they were having this increase. Now, the reasons seem to be pretty diverse. Some were looking at there's population increases. There are also employment increases, and also just additional residential and commercial development. And they're all going to kind of go hand in hand. Longer trips did not seem to be the major issue. We were sort of curious. Maybe people were just choosing to live a little further away, and that did not seem to come into play. It really was population and employment being the primary issues that we had to deal with. Special event and tourism was selected by a number. And as you look, we can kind of go through and you can see that the day-to-day peak hour, that's the most. That's the largest factor that most had. So 70% either had a high degree or a very high degree of agreement with that. Special event and tourism was the next in line with, still about 45% saying that really was a major issue for their agency when it came to congestion. And then it kind of went down. Next after that, you had some freight, and then the rest were all smaller. Work zone and traffic were down there, and then parking and weather were the least. So let's talk about special event a little bit. So our special events, we're running what those tended to look like. They could be reoccurring events at something like a stadium or continuous events that occurred for a single or multiple days. An example being like a festival. There could be some sort of street use event requiring temporary street closures. We have seasonal events, agro-tourism, you pick apples, things like that. And then holiday shopping. And this is sort of, did they have that in the area, and how much did that increase congestion? And the two mapped pretty well, although, right? So reoccurring events were an issue, and they also had congestion increases associated, continuous events. Interestingly, the street use did drop off a little bit. You had numbers say they had the street use, but then they didn't all associate that with congestion, was interesting. And then, of course, you had the seasonal events and the holiday. Now, we also did have some other on that. It was interesting, some looked at, said, railroad was actually one of their congestion issues. We had one response says basically their seasonal events had become year round. It just was sort of a constant season. So they weren't even thinking about that as seasonal anymore. So, there are other pieces, but what I find interesting again about this is really how much of a split you see, that there really are a lot of different causes, and that the different agencies are going to, their solutions then are going to really start being mixed. And you're going to, start to see that. So one thing we sort of asked was, well, how do you plan for this? How do you decide if this upcoming event is going to be a congestion issue? And again, the agencies were pretty split, right? you had about 22% there. You know, attendance was identified by about 22% of them. Location of event consideration, like where is it, was a major issue. And availability of law enforcement. So law enforcement does become a major player in the local, in the rural and small urban in terms of handling congestion. You see those three really kind of pop out as their major planning issues. And then after that is, you know, did the event actually ask for assistance? Or was there some sort of initial planning for traffic initiatives? We asked who really handles the special event traffic, and that was I found that actually quite interesting, that just the agency handling was quite rare. So it wasn't usually the traffic agency or the event organizers. The most common response was the police department would be handling what was going on, any sort of congestion or congestion-related issues. And tied with that was a combination, right? That the agency, the event organizer, and the police would all sort of jointly be working on it. But so you really start to see here that one of the major resources that the small urban and local are using, small urban and rural are using, is the police department is a major handler of their congestion. We asked, you know, what are some of the issues that are contributing to the congestion? And one is just limited parking, and that was the one that pops out the most. And then sort of drops down that there's a lack of alternative routes and limited access. Those kind of the major. Transit, you know, was by a few, but not as many. And this lack of hotels and event staging were mentioned by a few, but not that many of the total. It really did come down to capacity and fewer alternative routes. When they talked about parking, we said, you know, where was parking an issue and how was it? What was their solution, right, for parking? Well, more parking, right? Now, again, only 9 of the 56, is that right? I just lost my number, sorry, 9 of 55 or whatever, said that it was additional parking. So this is a fairly small group to start with. And then, hey, how do I fix it? Well, put in more parking. And then at a lower level, you know, we had transit, parking control, portable, changeable message signs, rideshare. And to me, I actually see some of this as opportunity, right? That maybe there may be some opportunity out there for folks to become aware and sort of maybe get some material out on ways you could use some of these things that have been successfully used in other areas. So I think this is actually an indication of opportunity in my mind. You know, weather again was out there. Weather was, you know, again, a sort of minor issue. I personally thought that was going to pop up a little bit more than it did. And it ended up being rain, but again, we're talking about 12 people. And so, you know, a few mentioned rain, and then of course, hurricane, snow, heavy winds, sun glare kind of pop up. Freight. So freight was mentioned. It's a smaller saying that to a very high degree, but there was a fair number who said there was a high degree of freight congestion. So if you sort of combine those two groups, it actually ends up being the third highest, right, for NS51. And this is how they would rank, you know, those parts of freight that caused the most congestion. It was the long distance freight seemed to be the largest issue. And then the percentage of trucks. So those were by and large the larger issues that the local and that the rural and small urban were dealing with. And then it was local freight, local delivery became the next two. And then lower were things like, was it a freight hub, or do they have freight crashes or freight restrictions? Those really didn't fall too much in the area. How do they reduce, right? What are their strategies for handling this? Well, you know, look at that, 66%, 2/3 were really shooting towards roadway improvements, seemed to be the major strategy that they were looking at. There was a little bit with specific drop-off pickup locations, so you can start to see some of these ideas of curve management and kind of handling something that is coming into play, and a little bit on, you know, maybe how do you limit. So those tools were there, but again, it was primarily this idea of road improvements and such as widening, which again, I see as opportunity. I see as opportunity that maybe there are other solutions that can start being considered as well. And then work zones and traffic crashes. We can talk a little bit more about those. And what are you going to see? So what are they doing? Well, the largest one is they're communicating with the public, right? So communications is the primary strategy. You know, let people know there's a work zone, let people know there's an incident, so they can sort of avoid that area. After that, you get into, you know, with your work zones is limiting the construction time of day. That consumes most of what the small urban and rural folks are doing to try to handle work zone or incident-related congestion. You have a small part of contractor incentives coming in there a little bit, and using the fixed or portable changeable message signs as well. So we can see, again, some of these limits and maybe some more opportunity. We did ask a sort of a larger question. Hey, what are those things that are giving you the greatest constraints, right? Where are the issues coming in? Is it budget? Is it training? Is it staffing? Is it on the administrative issue? And I guess maybe this was a little bit predictable, right? Budget was clearly the number one, right? If we had more money, we could fix these kind of things. It had a very high degree was the most frequently selected answer, and then a high degree was the next. With staffing, again, very high degree and high degree were sort of tied. So those two issues are really coming into play. After that, it was training. Now, training was not as much in the high degree, but it actually had a fair amount of, not on the very high degree, but a fair amount of high degree. So that was certainly identified. But then there were, a number that didn't really call that out as much. And then finally, administrative. So folks really weren't looking at administrative as being their primary constraint. It really wasn't this idea of budget, staffing, and then maybe some training. So the expected effectiveness of different factors in helping to relieve congestions, what were they were most interested in? We tended to be additional funding, right? That kind of makes sense, was what they thought would be the most effective, improving signal timing, and then major infrastructure improvements, right? And then after that, a little bit of minor. So you can sort of see sort of the trend there. They tend to be very infrastructure heavy, looking at signal timing and coordination, looking at funding to do these things, and then the major infrastructure improvements. There wasn't, as much on, say, greater cell phone service, right? So maybe we can get more to traffic info out. That wasn't seen as a major piece. The training resources was there, but again, not as significant a piece. Relationship with other agencies, that kind of came into play. So, you'll see a significant percent actually said that those relationships could be significant. So there's definitely going to be some opportunity there. More traffic control officers, road condition improvement, that's more of a maintenance and repair type thing. So again, what do we see where the agencies tend to be going to address these issues? They tend to be infrastructure based. That tends to be where they are. Separated by the population, we said, well, do you have training, right? We're just sort of curious what their training was. And pretty much at the 0 to 5 and 5 to 10, they were saying no, that they really didn't do much with training. And it was even fairly low at the 25 to 50 to the 10 to 25. They were around 20%. And so that becomes an issue. And then you start wondering why some of that's going to happen. Well, hey, did they think this stuff was effective? Or, sorry, next slide. How interested were they in getting more? Yep, the 25 to 50, 10, there was a clear interest in getting more training material. At the lower populations, the 5 to 10 and 0 to 5, the interest was more mixed. I mean, it's there, but it's not strong. And I think, there's probably a number of reasons for that that need to be sort of, sought out. One of those being, again, this is a very small sample, but they're not really seen as overly effective, right? So you've only got 50, nobody, I found this really kind of fascinating, the effectiveness of training materials that agencies have. And only 6 even acknowledged having training material, and none of them said they were extremely effective. And I think that's sort of a statement, right? That there's a real opportunity to get some better material out there. Now, half did say very effective, that's great. But the other half was moderately or slight. And I think that's a bit of a problem, right? I think that identifies a significant challenge. And how is it transmitted? Well, most folks, the largest answer was some sort of PowerPoint, and that's followed by, paper or PDF. So most training is coming in that format. And then after that, it's going to be in person and then others. And I think that's maybe identifying. I think there's a strong tie between these two, that maybe we're not doing this training the best way we could be doing it to have it be effective. All right, so I think with that, that's sort of what we found. That's what all the agencies were telling us. And then I think, Dimitra, I think you are going to take back over.
Yes. Okay. Okay, there we are. Moment. Okay, so after we send the survey out and we get the results, at the end, we had them a question asking them, can we please contact you if we need to more information? So we wanted to ask some of them over the phone to see, like, to get more insight. So some of them said, yes, we can do, but as Mike said, the survey was sent in 2019, and we were planning to do further interviews early 2020. So as we prepared everything and we I got RB approval, it was March. And then the COVID hit, so everybody started switching, working from home, switch schedules, there was uncertainty. So we delayed the interviews until August 2020. So we sent out emails to follow up, we called them, and in the end, we weren't able to create any focus groups, so we weren't able to bring people together to discuss this, but we interviewed people individually. Actually, only 3 out of those that had said you can contact us responded. So, and we contact them, we talked, we had the different questions, like looking more into the different congestion issues, more into what training they receive, what training they need. But we didn't get much different information of what the survey had showed us. So the effort highlighted that there is congestion, of course, due to the peak hour traffic, crashes and work zones are an issue. And of course, there isn't systematic procedure to monitor, measure, and mitigate congestion in those areas. There was interest for training material, but they didn't, they said maybe even if we have the training material, our staff don't have time to invest in that because there are so many things going on. But looking only the few responses that we got from the phone interviews were that 60% responded that phone calls were the primary issue of the primary source of identifying congestion. 66 said that traffic crashes were a cause of congestion. 61 said that work zones contributed to congestion. And then a majority said that, of course, the funding will help. Now, about 78% responded that they don't have the training materials. So we decided to create a flyer to summarize all these findings in a very small, document. And then we created a website that they can go and find resources in terms of congestion. So I'm going to show you the flyer now. So we have here like what the project is about, that we sent out a survey, and then all these, the survey findings, the summary of them, very short. And then if they don't have resources that can access our website by clicking the link or scanning this QR code. So the website, if you click on it, you can all access, see this live. Let me show it to you here. It says the project name and then who is the research team, so you can contact us. And then we have the resources, so we have them under different topic areas. Then we have the different, like under different agencies. And then a different data and manuals for different states. So we are planning to expand on this because we didn't include for all the states, but these are examples. So for example, if there is manual for South Carolina, maybe if you are in a different state, you say, okay, maybe I should look to see if my state has a manual like that. Or I can refer to other states that are very close to the area. So this is live. So if you have any comments or any feedback on this, any other resources, like if you are from small urban or rural areas and you have some ideas or some resources that you want to get access to, you can let us know. So in closing, congestion, of course, is an issue. We weren't able to contact as many people as we wanted. You saw that we sent 445 requests out. We got 51 from the small areas, but the 98% said that peak hour congestion is a factor. most agencies said that there is no systematic data collection. And then there aren't enough resources available for alleviating congestion. Of course, limited funding contributes to that. So if there is extra funding, that will help with the congestion. And then providing additional training material and getting different strategies, maybe that will improve. So that's a major future effort. So now we have a short survey for you to fill out. So we're going to give you a few minutes, and meanwhile, please send us the questions in the chat, and we're going to monitor the chat and answer the questions. Okay, so we have a question that if we assessed any cost effectiveness of these strategies. So no, we didn't look to see anything related to the cost, so how that impacts the area. So maybe that's a good idea for looking into it in the future. Another question is if we had any surprising findings from the survey results. In my opinion, it was surprising that there is so much, limited training information and training material for those agencies. That was from my point of view, but I don't know if Mike wants to add anything.
I don't know if I would say it was surprising, but I think something that really came out when you kind of dig into the results was the amount of variety, right? You want to sort of think about rural or these areas sort of as, kind of similar. And they're really not. The issues you see are going to be very different from area to area, which is going to make them the challenges of how do you address it is going to become very specific to that agency, and the training is going to become very specific to that agency. So I think, for me, one of the more insightful things was just this idea of, you can't paint a broad brush across something like rural congestion. It is a very diverse topic.
Okay, so we don't have any more questions. So if you do have any questions, feel free to email us. Any report publicly available. So we are preparing now the final report, and it will be published probably in the next 2 to 3 months. The website that I said, that is public, but once we prepare the final report and is ready to be posted on the Stride website, we can email you all and let you know that that is available. So it will be a report available. So if any more questions come up and we're not here, please feel free to email us or email anyone from our team. And make sure you please fill out that survey. And I think that's it for today. So thank you very much for joining us.